We're not saying, Lord, your will be done. We're saying, Jesus, I want my way now. Will you just do it? Will you just make it happen? And we've maybe all heard someone talk about this passage and highlight just how Martha focuses so much on being busy and misses the opportunity to sit at the feet of Jesus, to enjoy his presence in the same way that her sister Mary does. And that's absolutely true, but there's more. And actually what reveals Martha's mixed up priorities is the fact that she's comparing herself to her sister. She looks to her sister and says, that's not fair. Why is she there and I'm here? My sister has left me to serve alone. I'm busy, and she is not. Again, how often do we look around and say things maybe on purpose or not, thinking, Lord, I'm serving. I'm giving my everything, but these ones aren't. In my family, I'm trying, but these ones aren't. In my workplace, I'm working, but these ones aren't. And somehow it's unfair to us. And our expectation is, God, what are you going to do? Convict them. Fix them so that they would behave like I would have them do. So this passage is then showing us that problem of self-comparison, that when we look at others, we're at risk of doing three things. We lift ourselves up too high, we push others down too low, and in the bit that we're familiar with, we miss the point altogether. In pushing herself up, in pushing her sister down, Martha is also missing that opportunity to be with Jesus. But that last part, that's perhaps the part of the story that we think we know so well, that we were taught in Sunday school, that we've heard so many times over. We all know at some level that Martha just got it wrong. So, the second rebuke. Jesus rebukes Martha. Martha expected that Jesus would take her side. Tell her to help me. She wasn't going to her sister and saying, Mary, come with me to the kitchen now. She took her complaint direct to Jesus and expected Jesus would fix it just as she would. Tell her to help me. On one level, her expectations are kind of understandable. Culture would dictate, this is her house. At least the younger siblings, the younger female siblings at least should be helping out. As a woman, as a younger sister, Mary should have been in the kitchen with Martha and not at the feet of Jesus. But Jesus is not the enforcer of culture, of cultural norms. He's not there to endorse the conclusion of Martha's self-comparison. The best place for Mary and Martha is not dictated by culture or comparison of how they sit against one another. But can you just imagine for a moment the atmosphere in that room? They're tired, they've been traveling, they've come together. There's no longer a big crowd outside. They're alone with Jesus. There's time to interact kind of more peacefully. And Martha charges in with this accusation and challenges Jesus for what she thinks her sister is doing wrong. Siblings again. Did you ever have a brother or sister speak to your parents in such a way that was so rude, so disrespectful, that you're like, it's coming. I just know it's coming. And you think, that's it. I'm an only child now. He's gone. My mom is going to hit him so hard, we won't see him till next week. You're convinced this is how she will react. This is what they deserve. And you can imagine Mary even at the feet of Jesus when her older sister comes in and starts this accusation. Mary, she must be shrinking down and like, she's not my sister. She's not my sister. I'm not with her. But the response that comes is not the one that we would expect. Martha, Martha, You're anxious and troubled about so many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. He starts off with this concern for her well-being. You're anxious and troubled about many things. Jesus recognizes that this pressure of culture, that her comparison with her sister is making her anxious. It is making her troubled and upset. Jesus doesn't start off with, this is what you got wrong. Be like Mary. Look at me. Spend time with me. He recognizes Martha, first of all, where she is and how she's feeling. You're anxious and troubled about many things. He recognizes the hurt that she is experiencing. And he doesn't chastise her misplaced service. And in some ways, like the way we retell this story and take out one lesson from it has maybe caused us to just kind of to narrow in on Martha. It's like, Martha got this wrong. We focus on the wrong. But Jesus doesn't do that. He doesn't chastise her. He doesn't say, you shouldn't be doing that. At no point does he say that. He doesn't say you're wasting your time with things. But what he says is something else is important. Yeah, how many of us carry this negative impression of Martha because of what she got wrong? But instead, Jesus gently redirects her attention. Mary has chosen the good portion. Not you're wrong, Martha, but look, there is a better thing. For those who were rooted in the Jewish culture then, excuse me, and particularly those there who had been following with Jesus, and the quick response to Martha would have been condemnation. Martha, you got it wrong. Don't do that, do this. But that's not. The slow response that took time, that listened and said, no, Martha, I see you. I see your heart. And I want to encourage you to enjoy a better thing. But yeah, sadly, our response, well, we fall way short, often. We fall way short of that example from Jesus. Instead of offering the invitation, that's what Jesus does. He invites Martha to enjoy more of him. Instead of offering ourselves an invitation to more of Jesus, we're quick to instead identify and label what is wrong. We do that with others, and we do it with ourselves. Let me sidestep for a minute just to a personal, I'm going to call it a pet hate, something I'm not very fond of. Jacqueline would probably tell you that I'm a little bit irrational with this sometimes, but I really don't like when people talk about Bible characters. And you're like, well, Bible characters, these are good guys. We can talk about them. And it's not that. I love the people. I love the stories. That's good with that. It's the word characters. For me, characters are in books. Characters are in movies. They are fiction. They are made up. They begin at the start of the writing and they end at the end of the movie, or whichever. There's no more of them than what we're ever told about. But that's not the case for Martha. It's not the case for many of the people that yes, Jesus uses parables. Those are stories. Those are characters. But Martha is a person. Just imagine it for a moment. If you started using the word characters like we do in the Bible to other people. Do you have characters in your family? Do you remember that character who used to be married to Auntie Margaret? Do you have characters at your workplace? Do you remember that character who never knew how to use the photocopying machine? It doesn't make sense. Another cultural sidestep, in Scotland we talk about characters like, oh, he's a real character, which is a way of saying they're just a little bit abnormal. But yeah. So my worry is, though, that when we talk about people from the Bible as characters, that we forget their humanity, that their whole story, that they're a whole person. We reduce them to one event, and Martha is probably one of the strongest examples. We treat them like parables, stories with a lesson rather than a living example of what it's like to meet Jesus and be corrected by him. Martha's story has been reduced to this one encounter. I actually read another commentary, a commentary that acknowledged that Martha is also the sister of Lazarus. We'll come back to that later. But he says she's absorbed, a preoccupied busybody, and that nothing else is known of her, reducing her story down to one event. But there's more to Martha. By being with Jesus, listening to his teaching, inviting him into her home, she went way beyond what culture would dictate or allow for her. There is more to Martha. Who here has been called a Martha? Who here has been anxious about something, busy in their home, worried about how something would work out, and thought, oh, such a Martha? A label. Martha reduced to one thing, stuck on you to reduce yourself to one thing also. But you see, the problem of the labels, when we take the thing out of context altogether, is that we tend to apply them just the same way Martha labeled her sister at the beginning of this story. She's not doing what I think she should do. She's not doing what culture says she should do. We bring our own bias and we use the labels with all the same bias that Martha did, with cultural bias and with this bias of self-comparison. So we're more likely to apply that label of Martha to a woman, even though any of us can busy ourselves too much and not focus on Jesus. We're more likely to stick that label on someone who, if we compare them to us, we think, oh, they're getting it wrong compared to me, rather than looking at ourselves entirely fairly. We're much more likely to call out what culture rejects. And then once we're done, once we've applied that label, we move on. Condemnation. We're stuck at that point. I know, that's a Martha. That's someone who worries too much. That's someone who's too anxious. That's someone who won't give their attention to Jesus. I'm someone who worries too much. I'm someone who's anxious. I'm someone who doesn't give his attention to Jesus. And we're stuck. We're stopped there. Instead of being like Jesus and seeing, that must hurt to be there. That must hurt to be in that situation. I hurt in this situation. And then he calls them, enjoy the good thing that lasts forever, the better thing. So we might call ourselves out just as much as any other and stick a label, maybe more so, especially with things like worry or anxiety. If we assess ourselves through a lens of culture and comparison, we will probably always find ourselves lacking. And then never move to forgiveness, never move to the invitation. We're going to look around and say, Jesus will never forgive this thing that I did. He will never forgive that thing that they did. I will never be holy like they are holy. And so that's Jesus' rebuke. When we compare how he responds to how we respond to the shortcomings of others and ourselves, it causes us to miss out on the invitation that Martha received. It stops us from giving that same invitation to others. If we just label and move on, if we just understand the story in one simple, flat way, then we won't move beyond the rebuke to the invitation. Jesus invites Martha. He recognizes her hurt and invites her. I see you're hurting, striving for things that won't last. But Jesus offers and invites you to be with him, and he will never leave you or forsake you. Is that how we respond to others when we are tempted to call them out on the thing that we're doing? That rather than labeling them by the thing that we think they're getting wrong, do we say, I see that you're hurting. I see that you're striving for things that won't last, but Jesus invites you to be with him, and he will never leave you or forsake you. Do you use the same words for yourself? Do you label yourself and feel stuck there? When the behavior comes back, when the thought comes back, you're like, oh yeah, that's me. I'm always like this. Or do you say to yourself, I'm hurting. I'm striving for things that won't last. But Jesus, you've invited me to be with you, and you will never leave me or forsake me. So as we go into worship, let's receive that rebuke from Jesus, because it's an invitation to know him more, to enjoy him more, and to enjoy something that will last, that will not be taken away from us. Amen.